In the face of dwindling oil revenue, the federal government has unveiled plans to reduce the cost of governance by setting up the efficiency unit in the Ministry of Finance. This week's edition of the program takes a look at government's efforts to streamline the cost of governance. Hello there, thank you for joining me on the program this week. I'm Gloria Umezuke. The question of efficiency in governance is about ensuring that each amount of public funds is spent judiciously. In other words, every naira of public funds must be spent in a way that is social, not private. Welfare of all is maximized. Well, this week on the program, we will be looking at how government intends to streamline the high cost of governance. But coming up ahead, over the years, Nigeria spends about 70% of her annual budget on recurrent expenditure, thus leaving about 30% for capital expenditure. A drastic way to address this is by reducing wastage and ensuring quantifiable savings for the country. And clearly, that option is being considered by the federal government. We'll take a listen. The issue of cutting the cost of governance regained wide popularity when President Muhammadu Buhari assumed office. The fact that the cost of governance in Nigeria is too high is no longer debatable. Available figures from the Ministry of Finance suggest that the nation's recurrent expenditure surpasses the capital expenditure by a ratio of 84 to 16. This includes non-wage related overhead expenditure such as travel costs, entertainment, events, printing, information technology, consumables, stationeries, etc. As at September 2015, the entire capital expenditure was just 194 billion naira, while overhead expenditure was 272 billion naira. This phenomenon has been the subject of criticisms from civil society groups and the international community. The implication is that a good part of the resources that should have been channeled to human capital development and infrastructure are rather wasted on administrative capital and recurrent expenditure, consisting of personnel and overhead expenses. This is the situation at the federal level and replicated in all states and local governments in the Federation. The situation is further worsened by the dwindling oil price, the state of economy, and decreasing inflow of foreign investments. State governments are struggling to pay salaries and are even contemplating reducing the national minimum wage or mass retrenchment. The high cost of governance led to many official interventions, including the monetization program, the setting up of the Committee on Restructuring of Federal Government Ministries, Departments and Agencies and Parastatals, otherwise called the Orosaye Committee, and many public expenditure management review panels. In the light of criticisms on the need to reduce the cost of governance, President Muhammadu Buhari and his vice, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, took a 50% pay cut. This step was followed by several state governors, while the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission set up a committee to review the salaries and allowances of public officers. The president also reduced the number of federal ministries to 24 from 32 by merging certain ministries and eliminating others. The federal government also issued a circular on guidelines regarding budgeting, revenue and expenditure aimed at ensuring that ministries, departments and agencies remit revenue and generate operating surpluses, which by law ought to be credited revenue fund and domiciled in the Central Bank of Nigeria. The government has taken a step further by establishing the efficiency unit with a mandate to recommend how best to manage public expenditures and understand why the prices paid for basic services by government often exceeded those of the private sector.
of ensuring
Nigeria certainly cannot afford the current cost of governance. Critics want the overheads to be reduced for the nation to drive growth and development.